Isolated by a brutal snowstorm, former Navy SEAL Elias Ward thought the mountains were his only enemy. He was wrong. Inside the ruined hotel, his battle-hardened dog, Valor, began to act strangely, pacing, whining, scratching at the frozen floorboards as if warning him of something beneath. Elias knew that look. Not fear, but instinct. Whatever was buried under those stones wasn't just part of the past. It was the reason people had died here. He had trusted Valor on the battlefield. Now, he would have to trust him again, to uncover a secret that someone would kill to keep hidden. Before we begin, please support the channel by subscribing and step into the storm with us. The wind clawed at the mountains of Iron Creek, Colorado, smothering the world in white silence. Snow fell thick and slow, swallowing the sound of tires crunching on the frozen road. The headlights of a pickup truck cut through the curtain of ice, and behind the wheel sat Elias Ward, 46, his face carved by years of war and loss. His short-cropped brown hair was streaked with gray, and a rugged beard framed his strong jaw. His blue eyes, once sharp with command, now carried the hollow stillness of a man who had seen too much. He wore a weather-beaten navy jacket, the fabric faded but still clean, a reminder of a uniform he could never quite remove from his soul. The war had ended, but it still lived inside him, in the quiet moments, in the dark corners of sleep. Beside him in the passenger seat sat Valor, a 6-year-old German shepherd with thick black and tan fur and alert amber eyes. He was lean, powerful, and carried himself like a soldier who hadn't forgotten discipline. Once a K-9 partner in the Navy SEALs, Valor had saved more lives than any man Elias knew. The two were bound by the kind of silence that didn't need words, a language forged through trust, battle, and survival. Elias parked before the looming shadow of the Silver Haven Hotel. The wooden structure rose 3 stories high, its roof sagging under years of snow, windows blind with grime. The sign out front was half buried, the letters faint but readable. 15 years of abandonment had turned it into something between a skeleton and a monument. The town clerk had called it a waste of money. The auctioneer had called it a mistake. But Elias had called it home. He stepped out, boots crunching on snow, his breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. The sky was iron gray, and the only sound was the wind groaning through broken shutters. Valor leapt from the truck, sniffing the air, tail stiff, ears perked. "Easy, boy," Elias murmured, patting his head. Valor's fur was warm beneath his gloves, a small comfort in a dead place. Inside, the hotel smelled of dust, rot, and something faintly metallic, like old blood. The lobby was a graveyard of furniture. Torn curtains drooped beside cracked windows, a chandelier hung crookedly, glass teardrops dulled with cobwebs. On the wall behind the counter still hung a photograph, faded and water-stained, of a smiling family, a man, a woman, and 2 young children. Beneath it, written in peeling gold letters, the words, "Welcome to the Silver Haven Est, 1919. Elias felt a pang deep in his chest. The world in the photograph looked gentle, untouched by cruelty. He explored each room, his flashlight beam trembling across empty halls. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a whisper. The people of Iron Creek had told him not to buy this place, warning him of bad history. A young woman named Clara Vale, once a maid here, had vanished 15 years ago along with the owners. A young couple and their children. No bodies, no trace, only silence. Some said she'd run away. Others said the mountain had swallowed her whole. Elias, who'd seen men vanish in darker deserts, didn't believe in ghosts, but he did believe in secrets. He unpacked lightly. A duffel bag, a folded sleeping bag, a thermos of coffee. He had learned to live small, to carry his world on his back. Valor lay near the hearth, head resting on his paws, watching him. The dog's calm gaze was both anchor and warning. Outside, the snow kept falling, steady and merciless. By late afternoon, Elias reached the 2nd floor. The hallway was narrow and dark, lined with numbered doors. The brass plates had tarnished to green. His boots left faint prints in the dust as he passed each door. 201, 202, 203, and then stopped at 204. The air felt colder here, the silence thicker. Valor's ears twitched, his body stiffened. He let out a low growl, deep and uneasy. Elias frowned. "What is it, Valor?" The dog pressed forward, sniffing the door frame, then scratched at the bottom panel with an urgency Elias hadn't seen since the war. A tremor ran through the man's chest, an echo of adrenaline. He turned the doorknob. It groaned but opened. The room was small, square, and strangely preserved. A single iron bed stood against the wall, the mattress sagging, the sheets brittle with age. A vanity mirror faced the window, reflecting the faint gray light of dusk. Dust floated like pale ghosts in the air. Valor went straight to the center of the room and stopped. He lowered his head, sniffed, then began to dig at the floorboards with his claws, whining softly. Elias knelt beside him. The wood was old but firm. The grain darkened with moisture. He ran his fingers along the seams and froze. A faint, irregular stain, deep red-brown, spread beneath the varnish. Dried blood. He exhaled slowly, pressing down old memories of tents, screams, and dust. "You found something again, didn't you, boy?" His voice was hoarse. Using a small pry bar from his bag, he wedged open two warped planks. They lifted with a reluctant crack, releasing a puff of cold air and the smell of mildew. Between them, something gleamed faintly, a small silver chain tangled in the dust. Elias reached in and pulled it free. It was a woman's necklace, the metal tarnished but still elegant, bearing a delicate heart-shaped pendant. Inside the heart, engraved in small letters, was a single name, Clara. Elias stared at it, his heartbeat echoing like footsteps in a long corridor. The name hung in his mind like a voice from the dead. Valor sat beside him, tail motionless, eyes fixed on the floor as if expecting more. He looked around the silent room, the bed, the mirror, the faint outline of a handprint on the dusty wall. Someone had struggled here, someone had bled here, and someone had never left. For a long time, Elias didn't move. His fingers tightened around the necklace. The chain felt cold, like truth just pulled from a grave. "Clara Vale," he whispered, testing the name aloud. It didn't sound like a ghost story anymore. It sounded like a cry for help that had never been heard. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the window like a warning. Valor whined softly, leaning against his leg. Elias stroked the dog's fur, his mind already circling the same dark thought. Whatever happened in this hotel 15 years ago, it hadn't ended. It was waiting for someone stubborn enough or broken enough to uncover it. And he had just arrived. The night fell like a heavy curtain over Iron Creek, and the wind scraped along the walls of the Silver Haven Hotel with a voice that almost sounded human. Inside, Elias Ward lay awake on the creaking bed in the small room he had chosen on the first floor. His flashlight rested on the nightstand. His rifle leaned against the wall, and Valor lay near the door, silent but not asleep. The old building seemed to breathe, its wooden bones creaking with every gust of wind. Elias had slept through rocket fire and mortars, but this silence felt heavier than any battlefield. Around midnight, Valor's ears twitched. He lifted his head, muscles tensing beneath his black and tan fur, and gave a low growl. Deep, warning, and primal. Elias's eyes opened instantly. His body, though worn with age, still moved with the reflex of a soldier. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, reaching for the flashlight. The beam cut across the hallway, slicing through dust and darkness. At the far end, for the briefest second, Elias saw her. A tall, slender woman in a faded gray dress, her hair tangled and dark, her skin pale under the dim light. She wasn't walking, but standing still, facing him through a mirror on the wall, her head tilted slightly, as though curious. Her eyes, though distant, seemed full of sorrow. Then the light flickered, and she was gone. The mirror reflected only the empty corridor and Elias's own shadow. Valor whined softly, pressing close to his leg. Elias felt the familiar chill of adrenaline, but forced a slow breath. "Reflections," he murmured, convincing himself. Nothing more. Yet, long after he lay down again, his pulse refused to calm. When morning came, Iron Creek was quiet under a pale sky. The storm had passed, leaving the world clean but colorless. Elias decided to drive into town, both for supplies and perhaps answers. The streets were lined with snow piled high along sidewalks, and smoke rose from chimneys. Inside Bennett's cafe, the warmth of coffee and the sound of conversation offered a brief illusion of normal life. The cafe was small, with wooden walls painted cream and shelves of old photos showing the town's history. Behind the counter stood Sarah Bennett, the cafe's owner, a woman in her late 30s with auburn hair tied loosely behind her neck, a gentle face marked by fatigue but kindness in her eyes. She wore a thick cardigan and moved with quiet efficiency, the way people who have lost things learn to. "You must be the man who bought the Silver Haven," she said, pouring him coffee before he even asked. Elias nodded, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. "That obvious?" Sarah smiled faintly. "In a town this small, rumors move faster than storms." Her voice carried a note of concern. "That place has got history. You should know that." He studied her. "What kind of history?" Sarah hesitated, glancing toward a man sitting in the corner, old, gray-bearded, and silent. When the man looked away, she leaned closer. "There was a manager once, Gregory Hale. Big man, sharp dresser, slick tongue. People said he was charming until he wasn't. The owner's wife complained about him harassing the staff, especially the young women. Clara Vale was one of them. She worked there 2 years, then she vanished." Elias felt the name strike a chord inside him. "You believe he had something to do with it?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "Most of us did, but nothing stuck. He left the day the hotel closed. Sheriff called it bad luck and gossip." She looked at him carefully. "You didn't buy that place to fix it up, did you?" He gave a wry smile. "Maybe I bought it to fix myself." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding the tone of a man carrying ghosts. "Be careful, Mr. Ward. Not all ghosts want to be found." Elias paid, thanked her, and stepped out into the cold. Valor trotted beside him, snow clinging to his paws. As they drove back toward the mountain road, Elias's mind replayed the gray figure in the mirror. He didn't believe in hauntings, but he had learned never to ignore a warning. By the time they reached the hotel, the sun was dying behind the peaks. The building stood as it always had, silent, distant, unwelcoming. Inside, the temperature dropped sharply, and the air felt damp. Elias dropped his coat near the front desk and paused. From somewhere below, a faint drip, drip, drip echoed through the halls. He grabbed his flashlight and followed the sound. It led him to a door half hidden behind a collapsed shelving unit. The handle was rusted, the hinges fused by time, but the lock, he noticed, was newer. Someone had sealed it from the outside not long ago. Valor sniffed the base of the door and whimpered. Elias forced it open with a crowbar, the metal shrieking against the frame. A narrow staircase spiraled down into darkness. The smell hit him first, stale water and something metallic beneath. The basement was unfinished, its walls rough stone, the floor uneven and slick. His flashlight beam moved over old crates, torn fabric, and rusted tools. Then it caught on something that didn't belong. A thick wooden door at the far end, bolted shut with heavy chains. Valor growled low, stepping closer. The sound of dripping came from behind that door. Elias knelt, feeling along the cold metal. One of the chains had been broken recently. He unhooked the rest and pulled. The hinges gave way with a groan. Inside was a small square chamber. The air was colder, thick with the scent of rot. Against the wall were iron rings embedded in the stone, each holding fragments of old rope. On the floor, dark stains like fingerprints dragged across the concrete. Elias's stomach tightened. He had seen interrogation rooms, war prisons, torture sites. This was not decay. This was history. Something glinted on a nearby shelf. He picked it up. A cracked photo frame. Inside, a young woman smiled brightly at the camera, wearing a maid's uniform and holding a feather duster. Her hair was tied neatly. Her eyes carried warmth and life. Below her smile was a name written in pen. Clara Vale. Elias exhaled shakily. "So, this is where you ended." He placed the frame down carefully, as if afraid to disturb her memory. Valor sniffed the ground, circling, then stopped at one corner where the water had pooled. The drip came from a cracked pipe, but mixed with the moisture was a faint, rusty hue. Elias crouched, touched it. It wasn't just water. Old blood had dried into the cracks. For a long while he stood there, the flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. He felt anger stir, a cold, precise kind of anger that he thought he had buried years ago. This wasn't just a ghost story. It was a crime. Someone had trapped and hurt that woman, and the hotel had become their silence. He looked at Valor, who was watching him with expectant eyes. "We're not done, are we, boy?" The dog's ears flicked forward as if answering him. As Elias turned to leave, he caught something faint in the corner of his eye, a reflection in a shard of broken glass lying on the ground. In it, for the briefest instant, a woman stood behind him, her eyes wide with sorrow. But when he spun around, the room was empty except for the echo of dripping water. The storm came without warning, rolling down from the mountains like a living thing. By nightfall, the wind howled through the cracks of the Silver Haven, slamming shutters and shaking doors. Elias Ward sat near the dim fireplace, staring into the flicker of orange light while Valor paced in front of the door, restless. The dog's fur bristled, his amber eyes fixed on something beyond the window. Elias felt it too, a pressure in the air, a heaviness that had nothing to do with weather. "It's just the wind," he muttered, though his hand never strayed far from the pistol on the table. Then Valor barked, a deep, urgent bark that cut through the storm like a flare. Elias rose instantly, grabbing his coat and flashlight. When he opened the front door, the cold hit him like a wall, and snow whipped against his face. The beam of his flashlight swept across the blizzard and then froze. There, collapsed near the porch steps, was a human figure half buried in snow. He rushed forward, knees sinking deep, and knelt beside her. She was young, mid-20s at most, with tangled brown hair crusted with ice, her skin deathly pale. Her cheeks were marked by bruises, and her wrists, bound by torn rope, were raw and bleeding. Hey, stay with me," Elias said, his voice rough but gentle. He lifted her in his arms, light as a shadow, and carried her inside. Valor followed close, circling anxiously. Under the firelight, the woman's face appeared fragile but strong beneath the damage. High cheekbones, a small nose, and faint freckles across her cold skin. Her lips trembled as she whispered something he almost missed. "Clara, he's coming?" Then she fainted. Elias laid her on the couch near the hearth and wrapped her in a blanket. He moved with quiet precision, the kind learned from field triage, checking her pulse, warming her hands, cleaning the dried blood. Valor settled beside her, his body heat adding to the warmth. When she finally stirred, her eyes opened. Hazel, clouded with fear and exhaustion. "You're safe now," Elias said softly. "My name's Elias Ward." She hesitated, her breath shaky. Lena Vale." The name hit him like a strike to the chest. "Vale!" She nodded weakly. "Clara was my sister." Elias sank back, realization spreading cold through his veins. "I found something that belonged to her," he said quietly. "A necklace, in room 204. Lena's eyes filled with tears. "That was her favorite. Gregory took everything else." Elias leaned forward. "Gregory Hale? He's still alive?" Her face twisted with fear, and she clutched the blanket tighter around her. "He's alive. He kept me for weeks, maybe months. I don't know. He wanted the video Clara recorded, the one that proved what he did to those girls. He thought I knew where she hid it." Her voice cracked, the words falling apart. "I didn't. He hurt me because I didn't." Elias's jaw tightened. He had seen this kind of cruelty before, in places where power had no law. "You're safe now," he said again, though inside he knew safety was fragile. If Gregory was alive, the storm wasn't their only enemy. As the night deepened, Lena slept fitfully by the fire. Elias sat in silence, watching the snow whip against the windows. His thoughts wandered to the war, to faces of the lost, to missions where rescue had come too late. Valor rested his head on Lena's knee, eyes half closed but alert. The dog had always known who needed guarding. When morning came, the storm had eased into a whisper. The hotel creaked under the weight of snow. Elias brewed weak coffee on a camp stove, the smell filling the room. Lena woke slowly, her body trembling as she tried to sit up. He helped her, his touch careful. She looked around the dusty lobby, confusion flickering in her gaze. "This place, I've been here before," she murmured, "as a child. My sister used to work here after school. I'd wait in the kitchen while she cleaned rooms." Elias nodded. "Then you understand what's buried here." She hesitated, staring into the flames. "Before she disappeared, Clara told me she had proof. Videos of Gregory abusing the staff, selling the footage to his clients. She said she would send it to a journalist from Denver named Reed, but she never did. The next day, she was gone." Uh, do you remember the journalist's full name? Lena frowned, pressing a hand to her temple. Daniel Reed, maybe? Or David? I can't be sure. She winced as the memory slipped away, replaced by exhaustion. He came here once. I remember his camera. He said he was investigating something about missing women in the valley. Elias stared at the snow-covered window. Somewhere out there, a man named Gregory Hale was still free. We'll find that video, he said firmly, and the truth. Lena looked at him, studying the quiet determination in his expression. Why are you helping me? He hesitated. Because I've seen too many people left behind. His voice was low, but something unspoken lingered. An old guilt carried too long. Hours passed as the fire dimmed. Elias cleaned her wounds properly, using what supplies he had from an old first aid kit. Lena tried to smile, though it faltered. You treat me like a soldier, she whispered. I treat you like someone who survived, he replied. That night, as darkness fell again, Lena slept under Valor's watchful eye. Elias stayed by the window, his silhouette outlined by the weak light of a lantern. He couldn't shake the sense that the storm outside had only been a distraction, that something else, colder, was coming. At midnight, Valor lifted his head, ears twitching. Elias followed the dog's gaze. Through the frosted glass, he saw faint headlights far down the road, a vehicle moving slowly through the snow, too deliberate to be lost. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Someone's looking for you, he murmured to Lena's sleeping form. But they're not here to save you. Valor growled softly, a sound that promised he understood. Elias checked his weapon and turned off the light. The Silver Haven sank back into darkness as the headlights disappeared beyond the ridge, leaving only the whisper of the wind. The war he thought he'd left behind was finding him again, this time in the mountains of Iron Creek. The snow had stopped by dawn, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the storm itself. Elias Ward stood in the hotel's main hall, listening to the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock that hadn't worked in years. Lena Vale was still asleep upstairs, wrapped in thick blankets, her breathing shallow but steady. Valor lay at her bedside like a sentinel carved of muscle and fur, ears twitching at every sound. Elias knew it wouldn't be long before whoever was in that black SUV found their way back. Gregory Hale was too cruel, too calculating to let go of unfinished business. He descended into the basement once more, flashlight in hand, the beam slicing through the damp, cold air. The memory of the chains, the blood, and the photograph of Clara still lingered in his mind. But something had been bothering him. An uneven line of mortar along the back wall, almost invisible unless you were searching for it. He crouched, pressing his fingers to the stone, and felt a faint vibration, air moving from behind the wall. You smell that, Valor? He murmured, glancing down as the dog sniffed the base of the wall, tail stiff, nose twitching with alert precision. With a pry bar and his strength, Elias worked at the mortar until a section of loose stone gave way. Behind it, a narrow passage opened into darkness. The space was barely wide enough for one man to crawl through. Dust and old cobwebs clung to the walls. Valor hesitated, then followed, his low growl echoing softly. They emerged into a hidden chamber, a forgotten room built between the foundation walls. It looked like a private screening room from another era. Dusty film reels lined a shelf, a decaying projector sat on a tripod, and a burnt-out monitor rested on a table. In the corner was a melted hard drive, its casing blackened by heat but not completely destroyed. Elias brushed the soot away and found that the ports were still intact. He used his small flashlight to inspect the wall socket. There was a generator switch. He pulled the cord of an old diesel starter. The machine coughed to life, filling the space with a deep hum and a faint odor of fuel. The monitor flickered weakly. Static blurred across the screen. Then a frame appeared, a frozen image of Gregory Hale's face. He was younger, clean-shaven, wearing a crisp suit and the smug smile of a man who believed he owned the world. Elias pressed play. The footage was shaky but clear enough. It showed a hotel room, the same wallpaper as upstairs. Hale's voice filled the room, calm and cold, as he directed the camera toward a terrified young woman in a maid's uniform. Clara Vale. She begged him to stop, her voice trembling, and behind the lens, Hale laughed. Then another man appeared, a guest in an expensive coat, his face blurred by motion. The screen cut out for a moment, then resumed, showing Hale counting cash and packing the tapes into a metal box. Elias clenched his jaw. He had seen monsters before, but never ones who hid behind polite smiles. The date on the video was 15 years ago, just before the hotel closed. The same week Clara vanished. He examined the desk and found another item half hidden beneath the debris, a small journal bound in cracked leather. Inside were pages of handwriting, each dated and signed CV. Clara Vale had written everything. Names of clients, dates, even coded notes about the man from Denver. She had been trying to expose them before she disappeared. As Elias flipped through the final pages, the generator lights flickered. Then, abruptly, they went out. The room plunged into black. Valor growled, low and sharp. Elias froze, listening. Somewhere above, floorboards creaked. Then, faintly, the crunch of tires on gravel. He climbed out of the crawl space and moved toward the nearest window. Through the frost-covered glass, he saw it. A black SUV, headlights off, idling in the driveway. 3 figures stepped out. One was broad-shouldered, with a long coat and a limp in his left leg. Even in silhouette, Elias recognized the posture. Gregory Hale. The man's face had aged, but not softened. He was in his mid-50s now, thick-set, his once-perfect hair silvered and slicked back. A jagged scar cut across his chin, an old injury that hadn't healed well. His expression carried that same arrogance Elias had seen in the video, mixed with the kind of cruelty that comes from a lifetime of getting away with it. He barked an order to the 2 men beside him, both younger, rough-looking, armed with shotguns. Elias turned off his flashlight, grabbed the journal and hard drive, and sprinted upstairs. Lena was awake now, frightened by the rumble of the approaching footsteps. Her face was pale but resolute. "He's here, isn't he?" she whispered. Elias nodded. "We don't have time. You need to hide." He led her to the locked service room behind the kitchen, the same one where he'd once found traces of blood. "Stay in here with Valor. Don't open the door unless you hear me." Valor resisted, whining softly as if he knew what was coming. Elias knelt and rested a hand on the dog's neck. "You keep her safe, buddy." The German shepherd licked his glove, eyes bright with understanding. Outside, boots crunched on the snow. Gregory Hale's voice echoed through the front hall, low and mocking. "Mr. Ward," he called, the sound oily and controlled. "I believe you have something that belongs to me. Let's not make this ugly." Elias positioned himself near the staircase, pistol raised. He could see their shadows moving past the broken glass door. His heart beat steadily. Not fear, but focus. He had lived through ambushes in Afghanistan. This was no different. Only now, the enemy wore the face of a man from home. The door burst open. The 2 henchmen entered first, flashlights cutting through the dark. Elias fired once, a warning shot that shattered the chandelier above. They dove for cover, shouting. Hale stepped into the entryway, smiling as though amused. "You don't know what you're getting into, soldier," he sneered. Elias didn't answer. He backed slowly toward the staircase, drawing them away from Lena's hiding place. The hotel groaned under the tension, wind whistling through the cracks like a whisper from the past. Hale's laughter echoed, deep and cruel. "You think you're a hero, but you're just another ghost in this house." As the lights from the SUV flickered through the window, Elias saw his reflection in the cracked mirror on the wall, older, harder, but unbroken. He tightened his grip on the pistol. "Maybe," he said under his breath, "but at least I'm not the monster." Then the power went completely out, plunging everything into darkness. Only the wind, Valor's distant growl, and Hale's cold laughter remained. The first shot cracked through the silence, like lightning tearing open the night. Glass shattered, wood splintered, and the old hotel that had waited 15 years in quiet decay suddenly came alive with chaos. Elias Ward moved with the precision of muscle memory, ducking behind a banister as a shotgun blast tore through the railing above his head. Snow swirled in through the broken window, carried by the screaming wind. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the musty air of the old building. Valor, crouched low beside him, bared his teeth, fur standing like a black and tan storm of its own. Across the hall, one of Hale's men, a tall, wiry man with a shaved head and a scar across his jaw, shouted for cover. His name was Vince, mid-30s, former convict turned hired gun. The look in his eyes was the look of someone who'd been promised money and didn't care who had to die for it. The second man, Rory, younger and stockier with a patchy beard, crept toward the stairs, his breath heavy, the kind of man who followed orders out of fear more than loyalty. Elias steadied his pistol, waiting for the flicker of a flashlight. The beam flashed across a picture frame, and he fired. Rory dropped instantly, the impact throwing him backward into a table that collapsed beneath him. Vince cursed, unloading another shell into the wall, but Elias was already moving. He rolled behind the counter, reloaded, and peered over. The floorboards creaked somewhere above. Gregory Hale was moving. Gregory's voice echoed down the staircase, smooth and cruel. "You should have left the past buried, Ward. Men like you never learn." His silhouette appeared against the flickering light of a lantern he held, his silver hair glinting, his mouth twisted into a smirk that barely hid his rage. "Do you know what this place was? A haven for men with power. They needed their secrets kept. I kept them safe. Clara didn't understand that." Elias stepped out from cover, gun aimed. She understood enough to die for it. Hale sneered, his hand twitching. "Then you'll join her." He threw the lantern down. Fire exploded across the wooden floor, racing through old curtains and broken furniture. The dry air fed it fast, turning the lobby into a furnace. Flames climbed the walls, licking the ceiling like the tongues of hell itself. Valor barked fiercely, leaping forward as Vince took aim again. The German shepherd's body hit the man with brutal force, knocking the gun from his hands. Vince screamed, struggling, but Valor's teeth found his shoulder, dragging him down. Elias fired once more, ending the fight with ruthless efficiency. The gunshot echoed through the collapsing halls. The heat intensified. Paint bubbled and cracked. Smoke stung Elias's eyes. He wiped the sweat from his brow and shouted, "Lena!" But his voice was drowned out by the roar of the flames. Upstairs, hidden behind the service room door, Lena Vale pressed her hands to her ears, trembling as the firelight danced across the crack beneath the frame. Valor's barking guided her like a beacon through the chaos. She forced the door open, coughing, and stumbled into the hallway, clutching a flashlight. Elias saw her appear through the smoke. "Lena, get out!" But before she could move, Gregory appeared from the shadows, his face twisted by fury, the fire reflecting in his eyes. "You think you can take from me again?" he shouted, raising his pistol. The heat made his skin glisten, his once proud suit now torn and smeared with soot. Lena froze. For a moment, the years of terror she'd endured at his hands surged back. Her body trembled, but her eyes hardened with something stronger. Defiance. She lifted the flashlight and shone it directly into his face. The sudden glare blinded him. He staggered, cursing. Elias seized the chance. He tackled Hale with a force that knocked the wind out of both of them. The pistol skittered across the floor, disappearing under burning debris. They fought brutally, fists and elbows, the way men who've both killed before fight, with no words, only instinct. Hale's strength came from rage, Elias's from purpose. "You don't get to win again," Elias hissed, driving his knee into Hale's ribs. But Hale was relentless. He grabbed a piece of flaming wood and swung it wildly, the blow grazing Elias's arm, burning through his jacket. Lena screamed. Valor, sensing his handler's pain, lunged through the smoke like a shadow of vengeance. The dog hit Hale from the side, jaws snapping around his forearm. The older man fell backward, shouting in agony as the fire spread around them. Elias snatched the gun from the floor and fired. Not to kill, but to end it. The bullet shattered a beam above, sending burning debris crashing down. Hale was pinned beneath it, coughing, his body half trapped in firelight. "You can't stop it!" Hale gasped. "You'll burn with me!" Elias stared down at him, chest heaving. "No," he said quietly. "We already survived worse than hell." He turned, pulling Lena toward the exit. Valor limped slightly, his fur singed, but his eyes fierce as ever. Together they broke through the side door into the freezing night. Outside, the world was white and endless. The fire raged behind them, consuming the Silver Haven Hotel, the flames reaching toward the black sky. The snow reflected the orange glow, turning the ground into molten glass. Lena collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Relief, grief, disbelief all tangled together. Elias stood beside her, watching the inferno. His breath rose in slow, heavy clouds. Distant sirens wailed through the storm. A local farmer named Henry Cobb, a stout man in his 60s with a thick gray beard and flannel coat, had seen the flames from his property down the valley. He arrived first on an old snowmobile, his eyes wide with alarm. "Good Lord, are you folks all right?" he shouted, rushing to help Lena stand. "Call the sheriff," Elias said simply. His voice was calm, but exhaustion lined every syllable. By the time the police arrived, Hale's 2 men were dead, and Gregory himself was barely conscious, dragged from the rubble by firefighters. The once proud manager was coughing black smoke, his skin scorched, his arrogance burned away. As they loaded him into the ambulance, Hale caught sight of Elias and tried to speak, but the oxygen mask smothered the words. Elias handed over the journal and the damaged hard drive to the sheriff, a broad-shouldered woman named Deputy Marianne Locke, early 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense tone. "You'll want to see what's on these," he said. She nodded grimly, her breath clouding in the frigid air. The fire devoured what was left of the Silver Haven until dawn. When the last embers faded, only blackened beams remained, a graveyard for the secrets it had once held. Elias watched the smoke drift toward the mountains, his arm bandaged, Valor leaning against his leg. Lena stood beside him, her hair tangled, face streaked with ash, but free in a way it had never been before. The nightmare was over. The truth was no longer buried, and for the first time, Iron Creek woke to a sunrise that didn't hide its ghosts. It burned them away. The snow melted slowly that year, retreating from the valleys of Iron Creek like a ghost finally ready to rest. Where fire had once consumed the Silver Haven, the ground was now blackened and soft, streaked with early shoots of green. Smoke no longer lingered. Instead, the air smelled faintly of pine and wet soil. Elias Ward stood on the edge of the property, sleeves rolled up, shoveling what remained of charred timber into a pile. The muscles in his arms flexed under the sunlight, their motion methodical, almost meditative. His once dark beard had grown thicker, flecked with more gray, and though his expression was still quiet, it no longer carried the hollow emptiness it once had. The silence of war had been replaced by something gentler, the sound of rebuilding. A few yards away, Lena Vale knelt beside the scorched signpost that once read the Silver Haven Hotel. She wore a faded denim jacket and jeans tucked into worn brown boots. Her hair, once tangled and lifeless, now caught the sun in shades of chestnut, fluttering in the spring breeze. Though scars still marked her wrists, her hands no longer shook. Her face had softened, though her eyes retained the quiet strength of someone who had fought her way back from the edge. "You know," she said, brushing dirt from the old wooden sign, "it's strange. I thought I'd never come back here. Now, I don't want to leave." Elias paused, resting on the handle of his shovel. "Coming back doesn't always mean staying in the past," he said. "Sometimes it means rewriting it." Valor lay nearby in the grass, his thick coat glossy under the sun, his ears twitching at every bird call. The 6-year-old German shepherd looked healthier than ever. The burn marks from the fire healed to faint patches beneath his fur. He rolled over lazily, paws in the air, enjoying the warmth he had once fought to survive through. In the weeks since the fire, the town had begun to treat the place differently. Locals who once whispered about curses now stopped by to help, donating lumber, nails, even food. Sarah Bennett, the cafe owner, arrived twice a week with baskets of muffins and coffee, her auburn hair tied in a messy bun, her cheeks always flushed from the walk up the hill. She teased Elias mercilessly about his stoic nature. "A man like you rebuilding a women's shelter?" she said once, laughing softly. "That's poetic justice." "It's Lena's idea," Elias had replied, though Sarah had caught the faint smile tugging at his lips. It was true. The project was Lena's vision. She called it the Haven Foundation, a refuge for women escaping violence, named in memory of her sister, Clara Vale. The first time she spoke the name aloud in front of the sign, her voice trembled. Elias remembered how she had stood there, head bowed, whispering, "You're free now, Clara." He hadn't said a word. He'd just placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her in silence. A week later, Deputy Marianne Locke, the sharp-eyed sheriff's deputy who had overseen the investigation, returned to the property. Her golden hair was tied back, and her navy jacket bore a new badge, one marking her promotion to sheriff. She carried herself with calm authority, her voice firm but kind. "The case is closed," she had told them. "Hales confessed to everything. The videos, the trafficking, even Clara's death. He'll never see daylight again." Elias had nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Justice doesn't bring peace," he said quietly, "but it lets you start building it." Locke had offered him a small smile. "Then keep building, soldier." Now, a month later, the rebuilding had become more than physical labor. It was healing in motion. Every plank, every nail, every repaired wall seemed to stitch back a part of their souls. Lena painted the new sign herself, her handwriting steady and confident. "The Haven Foundation, in memory of Clara Vale." Beneath the words, she painted a small symbol, a white feather. She used to keep one in her apron, Lena said. Said it was a sign of protection. Elias stepped beside her, watching as she added the final brushstroke. "You've given her more than peace," he said. "You've given her purpose." Lena looked up, her hazel eyes glinting with sunlight and emotion. "If it weren't for you and Valor, I'd still be lost in the snow." Elias shook his head slightly. "If it weren't for you, I'd still be hiding in the dark." His voice carried the weight of truth, each word shaped by gratitude rather than grief. They stood there for a long while, saying nothing more. The breeze carried the scent of spring and pine through the clearing. Valor walked between them, tail wagging, and settled at their feet, his gaze shifting between them like a silent observer of peace. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, the first lights came on in the rebuilt structure, a single wooden lodge that stood where the hotel once burned. The glow from its windows spilled onto the ground, golden and warm. A group of women arrived in a small van, Sarah among them, helping two new residents carrying suitcases. They were women of different ages and faces marked by quiet pain. But when they stepped inside and felt the warmth, something in them eased. Lena greeted them with a smile that reached her eyes. "Welcome home," she said softly. From outside, Elias watched through the window. He didn't go in. It wasn't his place to take the light, only to guard it. Valor sat beside him, alert but calm, as if he too understood the peace they had fought for. Sarah stepped outside and stood next to Elias, crossing her arms against the chill. "You could come in, you know," she said teasingly. Elias's lips curved into the faintest grin. "I will, someday, when it feels like I belong to the living again." Sarah looked at him sideways. "Maybe you already do." He didn't answer, only kept watching as Lena led the women to the fireplace inside, her laughter soft and real. When the last light faded from the horizon, Elias turned toward Valor. "Looks like the Haven found its purpose again." The dog tilted his head, tail flicking. Elias reached down and scratched behind his ears. "Good work, partner," he said. As night settled over Iron Creek, the New Haven glowed like a beacon in the dark, no longer a place of horror, but of hope. The ghosts were gone, the snow was melting, and for the first time in years, Elias Ward didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he was home. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't happen in bright cathedrals or under golden skies. They happen in the quiet hearts of those who refuse to give up. Elias found light not through vengeance, but through grace, through a second chance he didn't know he needed. And Lena, she turned her pain into purpose, proving that even the darkest places can bloom again when we let God in. Maybe tonight, wherever you are, you're standing in your own kind of storm. Maybe your Silver Haven hasn't burned, but your heart feels like it has. Remember this: no night is too dark for His light to find you, because faith, love, and courage are the real foundations that never burn down. If this story touched your heart, share it, so someone else might remember they're not alone. Comment Amen if you believe that God still works through ordinary people and loyal hearts, even through a soldier and his dog. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of faith, redemption, and the quiet miracles that change lives. May God bless you and keep you safe in every storm. And may your haven, wherever it is, always be filled with light.